one we go to first and not the one we go to last, to pray and ask for God's blessing over our lecture. Because many people will write their lectures, they'll prepare their notes, and then at the end, they'll ask God to bless it. They just say, hey God, like, I prepared this, please let it impact people's lives. But what we want to do is we want to start by seeking the Lord and asking Him what He wants to bless people with and how He wants to impact people. So, point number 2, which Pine brought up, is we want to consider our audience. So, the Fast and the Furious cast is a pretty good audience because each of them are very different. There are different races, they're from different places, different personalities, and so we need to consider the audience for teaching. Okay? So, point number 2 is to consider your audience, and arguably this point is the most important point. Behind prayer, considering your audience is the most important thing you can do. And the reason is because we have to know what our audience is ready to receive. And so as you consider your audience, you want to put yourself in the shoes of the audience. You want to think like your audience, okay? You want to consider their thoughts, consider their learning styles, consider them as people so that you can effectively teach them. And often we are so concerned with what we will look like or what we will say or how we will present it. But our audience should be our number one concern. Because I could get up to teach on the character and nature of God, and I could give a very theological teaching, and it's going to be super powerful, and it's going to be really effective, but if I'm delivering it to a Sunday school of 5-year-olds, no one's going to get it. And so you need to consider the people you're speaking to. You need to think about the people you're speaking to. And so when you prepare a lecture, you can't just prepare what you think is going to be best for what you know, but you need to think about what is going to be best for the people that I'm speaking to. Because they're going to be the ones who learn, right? And what is a teacher? Causes others to learn. And for others to learn, we have to consider what they need to know, who they are, how they think. Because if we're not causing them to learn, then we're not teaching anybody. So, teachers cause other people to learn, and if we're not causing people to learn, then we've failed as teachers. And so we need to consider the audience so that we know how they will learn and what they will learn. And we need to think about, what does our audience need to hear? Do they need to be encouraged right now? Do they need to be challenged? And that's where prayer comes in big time. Is asking God, what do these people need right now? Do they need a strong teaching, or do they need to be moved zealously through preaching, to be encouraged to press on with what God is doing in their lives? So to be effective, we need to first consider our audiences. We need to consider their struggles, their pains, the things they're going through in their life, where they're at, what they're learning. And your audience is always going to ask directly or indirectly, why should I listen to them? So either it's going to be in the front of their minds, why should I listen to this person? Or it'll be in the back of their minds, why should I listen to them? And asking that question, why should I listen to them, is made up of the questions, can I trust this person? Does this person care for me? Does this person know what they're talking about? And so, because we're talking to people, we need to consider the questions they're asking. And that's one of the big reasons that we introduce speakers in YWAM. Because an introduction for a speaker should tell you why you're listening to that person. So when Andrew stands up and introduces somebody, and he tells you, this person's done this, he has a degree here, he's been teaching in YWAM for 7 years, he's telling you why you should listen to him, not just giving you a fun report about their history. Because all of you guys, when you get up and teach, your audience will be thinking, why should I listen to them? So we want to be aware that we need to prepare for those kind of things and prepare to deliver messages for people that shows why they should listen to us. And people want to hear what's meaningful for them, meaningful to them. That is why speakers love questions. Because questions tell the speaker what the people want to know. And if I stand up here and I give you all sorts of information and I come to the end of the lecture and everybody's like, yeah, that doesn't really mean that much to us, or we already knew that, then he's going to completely miss a whole day of lecture that he could have given effectively to people that needed it. But the questions help direct people to understand what it is that you are to teach, how you are to teach and deliver to people. So we need to consider what they're looking for and what they need to know. So what is meaningful to them? What is going to impact them? Because honestly, as human beings, our own welfare, our own value is often in the forefront of our mind, especially in Western culture. We think, why should I do this? Because being here today, on Thursday, after the school is over, you're spending your free time to be here to learn how to prepare lectures. And I'm hoping that you guys value this, and by you being here, it shows that you value it. And so I, as a teacher, have to think about what is meaningful to them, what is going to impact them the most, what is going to be the most effective for them to take away from this time. And so people are often most interested in themselves, because you guys are here to learn how to teach so that you can teach other people. So you being here is showing an interest for yourself. And oftentimes we think of that as a bad thing, which we don't want to be selfish people. But if we want to teach people effectively, we have to learn certain things, right? And so you are thinking of yourself in being here. You're not just here because you're trying to be nice to me, okay? Because then the whole class would be here. If you guys were only here just to be nice to me, to listen to me speak, then everybody else would be here. And it really shows that you guys want to learn something. So the value of the listeners will show in what they're listening to. So we need to consider what is meaningful for people. And we need to get to know our audience and spend time with them. Something that I learned from Dan Bauman is that a speaker should always spend time with the students. Speakers should always take time out of their schedule to spend it with the students, and that is the most important thing they can do during a speaking week, because they will learn what is important to the students, they will learn what they need to know, and what they already know. It will help them to effectively communicate with them and to them. And so, for example, people like Debbie Yu, who did one-on-ones with people, Scott Conable did one-on-ones with people, Dan Lewis always ate breakfast with us. Speakers like that spent time with students and took time out of their schedule that they could be preparing or setting things up to spend with students so that they know their audience better. And so that is things we need to be aware of and pay attention to in looking at our audience. And that was something that was hugely helpful when I went and taught in India last fall. When I was there between every lecture session or in the evenings, I always spent time with the students. When they were doing work duty, when they were cleaning dishes, even though I was the speaker, wanted to spend time with them and get to know them and show them that I'm on the same level as them. And just because I'm coming in as an international speaker for a DTS doesn't mean I'm any higher than you are. And so as speakers and teachers, we are on the same level as people, and that is one of the best ways to learn your audience. And so a few things to consider for your audience are their age, their gender, because you're going to speak differently to a group full of males or a group full of females differently, or a mixed crowd. You want to think about their worldview and their education. Their interests and how they will use your teaching. Will it be something that they need in the future? And you also want to think about, in regards to your audience and your setting, think about the size of the setting. So, teaching 12 people is different than teaching 2 people. You know, if it was only Sheree and Jane, I'm going to teach differently to them than I would be to all of you, than I would be to the whole DBS class. And so size of the class is really important. Okay? Size of the classroom is also really important because of the unconscious effects it has on the students. So being in a room this size is great because you guys feel you have space, but it's also restricting. If we were in the Ohana court, it'd be really uncomfortable because it's much too big of a space for much too few people. So you want to think about things like that. How does the size affect your students? Physical settings. So you want to think about the time of the day that you're teaching in. So a lot of my teachings over the past year have been from the 1 to 2 o'clock hour, which is one of the hardest times to teach in Kona because there's no AC, everybody's just eaten lunch, and it's hot. So everybody falls asleep and zones out, and it's hard because you have to effectively connect people, and especially with biblical history, it's difficult. But if you can find a way to effectively connect your audience, then you'll rope them in every time. And so something I like to do in that, because I've gotten used to having that time slot in Kona, after lunch, hot time of the day, and most people are falling asleep, is I will often bring up controversies. And I'll bring up things that people have a hard time with. I'll discuss hard topics so that people will pay attention. They'll discuss, they'll listen. And so you need to think about, how am I going to effectively utilize the time I'm given? So, things you also need to consider in physical settings is the room temperature, which is a hard thing in here. I wish we had brought fans, but that's okay. And then the size of the room. And then you want to think about materials that you're going to work with. Okay, so projectors or sound and whiteboard. So I know that here with this teaching, I'm going to need a whiteboard because I'm going to use it to write things on. I had told Yo 2 or 3 weeks ago that I would not need a projector, and then last minute decided I wanted to do some PowerPoints. Then I came in this morning and he's like, they already packed it up. So I should have considered that beforehand, right? So that was something I should have considered. So if you're going to use those things, you need to consider them ahead of time and not just at the last minute. And then consider the audience attitude. What is their level of interest, or their knowledge, or their attitude towards what you have to give them? All right, so audience is one of the biggest ones that we're going to cover because that is, like I said, arguably the most important part of preparing and considering a lecture is your audience. Number 3, choose your book or topic. And that might be given to you, or it might be something you get to choose. And this is super important because we have to know what we're talking about. So we want to choose our book or topic or have it given to us. So for DBS, I had an opportunity to choose a number of different things to teach on, and I chose James and 1 Peter. And things you need to consider are personal interests in choosing a book or topic. You want to think about, what are you interested in? Because oftentimes what you're interested in is going to have more authority when you speak about it. Because you're passionate about it, you care about it, it's something you really want to see. Which is why I love teaching the book of James and 1 Peter, because they're so practical. And I love practicality, and I love character, which are 2 very big highlights in both of those books. Things you want to consider with this is the needs of your audience, okay? I am not going to teach the history of Acts to a bunch of 5-year-olds, right? I would teach something like Jesus walking on water, because that's really cool. And they would probably really enjoy that, or how Jesus multiplied bread and food. But I'm not going to teach about Solomon building the temple, right? So you need to consider your audience when you choose things like this. You can't just choose what you're interested in, but consider your audience. We're in point number 2. And you want to think about what has spoken to you or ministered to you, and also the direction from the Holy Spirit. So those are all things you should consider in this, because they will help you to choose a book or topic for your audience and what the Lord is leading you to do. Now, picking sermons or preachings is often harder than picking a teaching. And so for this, you would want to seek the Lord. Okay, what am I to preach on? What am I to share in a sermon? Because they're a little harder, they're often more topical. And where teaching, you can go to a dictionary and find tons of information, and you can deliver a teaching that's really easy. But for preachings and sermons, you're going to have to choose your own ideas, you're going to have to illustrate them extensively, and connect them with a large, broad audience. Where teachings, you're going to have a more narrow audience. So, for example, I have you guys who have all done DBS. So I can make tons of Bible references that are really obscure, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Just because you've read it. And you're like, oh yeah, I remember hearing that. Even if you don't remember it exactly, you're like, yeah, that's from somewhere. But if I'm preaching on a Sunday, I can't just make vague references to the whole congregation, because 95% of them have never read their Bible all the way through. So I can't make stuff like that. I have to think about, okay, what am I going to do? And so sermons can often be a little more difficult just because of the audience. So that's why we have to make sure to pray to the Lord and ask Him, what are you wanting me to speak on? And a great way to collect sermon ideas for choosing your book and topic is to write things in the back of your Bible that have spoken to you. So if there's like a sermon that was like, oh, that was so good, write like the title or a short summary of what that was that spoke to you. Or like, so I have friends who keep lists of sermon ideas, and so they'll put like a topic in the back of their Bible and write a couple verse references with it. And then they can pull off of that when they need to in an instant. So that could be something as simple as a devotional. So someone's like, okay, we're going to do a devotional this week on outreach, and you need to do the devotional. And you're like, okay. Instead of having to try to figure out exactly what you're going to do, you go to the back of your Bible and be like, okay, these are things God's spoken to me through. God, do you want me to share one of these? And they're already ready available, they're easy to go to, and you can write something out. Or all the way up to like preaching in front of a church, and you do something similar with that. So we need to think about what we're going to speak on, how it's spoken to us. So for me, whenever I have the opportunity, I love doing Bible overview because it's been so effective in my life and helps me to see the Word of God fully, like the front of a puzzle box. And I love teaching history, especially the New Testament, because I think it gives so much context. And so for me, those are things I love speaking on. And then for sermons, I love speaking on character, Christian character and conduct. So think about those kind of things. What has spoken to you, and what is things that you love to teach on? And you can, because the Bible is so comprehensive, you can pretty much pull any teaching from any book, nearly. So I could teach on like leadership structure from the book of Nehemiah, or I could teach on loving one another, both from the book of Nehemiah, two totally far topics from each other. And so with that, you'll learn creativity and preparing more and learning how to prepare more. All right, study and collect resources and material. Number 4, study and collect resource material. So if you do a good job on this, and you study a lot and you collect a lot of material, then you will have more material than you have time for, oftentimes. And you'll see that, like, for example, Mark Smith. He had tons of material and didn't have time to cover everything. Or would finish out PowerPoints and just say, I didn't have time to cover everything I had. Or Dan Lewis, who had a lot of PowerPoint and just didn't have time to do it. And so what you'll find is that oftentimes you will prepare or have more material than you have time for. And that is a good thing, because then you can narrow down and summarize the things that you need to summarize and condense what you have. So this is okay, and it will give you more to choose from. And because you guys have done DBS, a great way to collect and study information is from what you have already done. Okay, so the studying you've done, your blog, the homework that you have done. In SBS, I went into SBS knowing that I was learning to teach. And so I did, everything I did was super extensive and really in-depth. And all of my work was like tons on top of everything that was required of me. And because of that, I've been able to just go back to my history papers or my charts and pull out tons of stuff, and I don't have to do any other research because I've already done it. I spent hours upon hours. even to the point where now I give out my history papers to people. So like Sheree quoted my history papers in her DBS homework. So because of the work I've done, other people can benefit from it. And I went into Bible school knowing I'm going to give this to people, and so I want to study so that I have stuff prepared for the future. And so you can take what you've already studied, what you already learned, and then use that in what you're going to teach. So that'll be a huge help. So when I taught Comtrans last summer, I had did the book of Acts and the book of John in that time, and almost everything I taught, very minorly, did I pull from other sources. I mostly used what I had already learned and what I'd already gathered. And then when I taught DBS, James and 1 Peter, nearly all of that was my own work already. And then I just took that and prepared a lecture on top of it. So what you already have can be hugely helpful. And begin your preparation in advance. So studying and collecting resource material, begin it in advance. So you don't want to just start at the last minute, like a week before, and say, oh man, like I have to do this next week, so I better start preparing. But if you're having a large teaching, you're going to want to prepare in advance to think about, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? What do I need to communicate? Now, everybody's different, right? So we talked about quiet times and how some people have quiet times, other people do different things, right? So everybody's walk with the Lord is different. So you need to think about preparation and how you prepare. So if you're a procrastinator, you want to begin preparation early. If you are really organized, you can think about, okay, this is when I'm going to start preparing, and this is how I'm going to do it, and lay it out. But think about yourself. How do I regularly operate? When do I need to start preparing? How do I need to start preparing? So for myself, like, if I'm going to get up and teach, I can prepare a lecture in 45 minutes a day before, and I'm fine. It's like, if I was going to give this lecture today, I probably would have prepared it yesterday in about an hour and a half, and I would have done everything for today. But that's my own personal preference in how I like to do it. So I'm thinking about it because I'm a external processor and thinker in my personality type. I think about tons of things a lot and process them, and then speak them out and process them myself. And so a lot of this I just prepare right before. But because I've never done this type of teaching before, I took a month to prepare these teachings because I've never done them before. But if something I've done before, I can just write it out again and do it a day before I have to teach it. So figure out what works for you, but being people who are new to preparing or new to teaching, take your time. That's when I am doing something I've never done before, I always take my time to prepare it and to invest time in it. And if you're teaching a book or a topic from the Bible, which is most of what we're talking about over these 4 days is going to be Bible teaching, okay? So if I make references to things, I'm making them towards teaching the Bible more than teaching of other things. But you can apply a lot of this into general teaching. So as you are studying and collecting resource material, you want to read the book of the Bible that you are going to be teaching, or the topic you're going to be teaching. And you don't want to just read it to read it. So you can right now, you can just flip open the book of Ephesians and read the book of Ephesians. And there's not going to be tons of purpose behind it. But what you want to do now when you are studying and collecting resource material is to read the book with a purpose. Okay? In DBS, we would just read the book to read the book. And you would pull out some information from it, and you say, okay, here's a GRP, or here's a character and nature of God. And those kind of things are what you're looking for. That's the purpose you read the book for, is to look for those things and to know the Bible. But when you're teaching a book, you want to read it with a specific purpose in mind. Okay? So, for example, you want to read it and ask yourself, what is the heartbeat of the book? So before you open the book, you're going to say, okay, what is the heartbeat of the book? And then you start reading it. And then when you get done, you say, what was the heartbeat of the book? What did I learn from it? You can look for themes. What is a consistent theme in the book? So like when I read 1 Peter, I'm going to read it and say, okay, what is the theme of this book? And then I'm going to start reading. And when I get to the end of the book, I'm going to say, oh, suffering is a huge theme in this book. It comes up over and over and over. But you will not notice those things unless you're looking for them. Unless you say, okay, what are the themes of this book? And then you look for them, and then you'll start finding them. It's like if I told you to go outside and look for red cars, you would see them everywhere. But then I asked you how many blue cars did you see, and you wouldn't remember at all how many blue cars there were. It is what you are looking for that will stand out to you. So if you look for a theme, if you look for the heartbeat of the book, those things will stand out to you. All right? A few other things you can look for is the structure. How is the book structured? Is it repetitive in how it writes, or is it linear? Is there a developing argument in it? You can read the book with thinking about historical background. So often what I'll do is I'll think, okay, get myself in the mindset of the reader. So I'm going to read Ephesians. All right, so there's mystery cults around me. There's tons of pagan worship. Banking is a huge deal. There's shipping in the city. I'm in a city that's the biggest city in all of Asia Minor, the second biggest in the empire. There's tons of cultures. I'm thinking about all those things, and now I'm going to read Ephesians. And when you read that, it becomes so much more real in those senses. And so you approach the book like that. And you can also think about the author's perspective, or read the book in other translations. So those are great ways to prepare for a book, is to read it multiple times. So like I shared when I was teaching James in 1 Peter, SBS in Taiwan, if you're teaching a small book, you have to read it 30 times. And if you're teaching a big book, you have to read it 15 times. So read it over and over and gather information. And like I said, review your past work. I do this tons, all the time, as I review my work all the time before I'm going to teach something. Is I look at what I have taught before, what I have researched, what I have learned, and then add that to it. And you guys in the West have so many resources available to us. For you guys, all of us in this room speak English, and there are so many English resources out there. Dictionaries, commentaries, maps. The Nelson's Maps and Charts dictionary is one of the most comprehensive small dictionaries of the Bible. In SBS, it was the Cheater's Dictionary, because it just gave you the answers. And so that dictionary is an amazing thing to use, right? So please use that, supplement what you already have with what you can gain. So dictionaries. All right, so this is something that I developed myself a little bit in SBS as I was learning, because I would say, like, okay, so I'm going to talk about the book of Ephesians, so I'm going to look up cults. Oh, that's one. That one down. Now, I'm going to read a short article in a dictionary on cults, and it's going to just give me some basic information about cults, right? And I'm going to read the information in the dictionary and be like, okay, well, that was it. Like, there was not that much information, okay? So let's say it's a 2-paragraph deal on cults. Now, what you need to do in studying and collecting resource material is be creative in your thinking, okay? So maybe I'm reading about cults here, and in this slide it says something like Artemis. And I'm like, oh, there's a word there that is unique. And so I'm going to look up Artemis. And so what you're going to begin to do is go from one article and jump to tons of different articles that you wouldn't have otherwise thought about because you're starting with this one. So then I'm going to see over here like mystery, and then I'm going to look up mystery. And then here is this word fate, and I'm going to look up fate because that's huge for the Ephesians. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to see prostitutes, and so I'm going to look up prostitutes. And what you begin to do is go from one article, and now you have 7 or 10 different articles that you can read, and it's going to start giving you tons of context. And so oftentimes we'll be so zoned in on one thing that we think that's all we have to study and all we collect. But because you read this article on this, now you see these things and you read on these, and now you better understand cults than the article even told you, because you have a more comprehensive understanding of it. And so this is super helpful, and this took me a few months to even realize and think about. As I was in SBS, I would just read one article and be like, well, there's not that much information in here. But as I started saying, okay, what else can I learn from this article? I would jump to different ones because of what I read. So you want to think about this, be creative in your studying. And use the internet as a supplement, not your first resort. Okay? So dictionaries, commentaries should be your #1 deals in teaching. They should be the first things you go to. The internet is like a supplement to come behind it and to back it up. It's not the first deal that we jump to. All right, number 5. Hey, Ellie, are they coming by?
Yeah, she just texted me coming down.
Coming down right now?
Yeah.
Should we break?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break, and let's just come back at 11:20. Just so you guys know, we're halfway right now, and so if we go past a little bit past lunch, that might happen, okay? So just be aware that that might happen.